Okay. So this morning, we took you down a path where we showed you the Bricsys Path to mechanical design. Now, you know that we've been working on BIM now for a couple of years. And I would say that last year in V17, those steps were small. This year, with V18, I really think we're going to blow you away. We've made so many strides, not only in the foundational portions of BIM, but also in the advanced areas of BIM model creation and management. And I don't know a lot about this. I'm kind of a mechanical guy, so I figured I'd bring somebody up here who's an expert. That person is Kevin Settelmeyer. And Kevin, please join us and take us down to the next road.
Thanks, Don. First, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues on the right, Peter Clarisey and also Jacob DeSutter. And my name is Kevin Settelmeyer, and we'll be your guides for this BIM session. Second, I would like to say thank you to Eric and Mark for making this an opportunity to be up here for a second year in a row. And also to Peter, Tiemann, Jacob, and the larger Bricsys family. I can't name them all, but it's been a great pleasure to collaborate with them over the past 18 months, and I'm excited to show you where we are. Part of why I'm standing up here is I'm a hybrid. I'm an architect and an engineer, and I've trained and practiced as both. In the late 90s, I had the unique opportunity when I was in grad school in the Boston area to get matched up with a small startup company. And it seemed like it might be an interesting ride. That company was named Revit Technology Corporation, and it turned out to be a very interesting ride. But it set my course in being very interested in the BIM side of things. So over the past 20 years, I've done a lot of different work in BIM in all different facets, but it's always come back to the strong interest in BIM. So that's why I'm standing here in front of you and excited to show you what's in version 18. In this session, we're going to dig deeper into the new BIM features. We're going to not only just look at the features, but look at, more importantly, the workflows that are part of BricsCAD BIM version 18. The context for this session, or the scenario, if you will, is that the three of us are part of a larger architectural design team. And we're collaborating with other disciplines to do the design on this development project. The project is set up on 24/7 Bricsys cloud collaboration tool, and that is also being run on the 24/7 server. Through the course of this demonstration, you'll see Jacob upload files that we're working on to that, so we have a live link. For better or for worse, but I think for better. Also, we have a project manager that's overseeing this project who's not the most technically savvy person. And they're going to be looking at things on 24/7 while we're updating our work and other team members are updating their work. And we'll probably be hearing from them through the course of this session when they get a chance to look at the comments, but it's most likely going to be orders that I'll get. There's a number of different facets with this project. We have a number of different buildings that we're looking at. And to describe that briefly, have many people been to San Francisco? Okay, a few. If you have, you might recognize this building. The inspiration for this project is off of one that was built in San Francisco a few years ago called the San Francisco Federal Building. It was done by Morphosis Architects, and Arap were the design engineers. Two unique aspects about this project are that the tower part, which is an 18-story tower, is predominantly naturally ventilated. Now, San Francisco is a great climate for that, but just the sheer size of the building and the fact that it's in the States makes that a unique approach. The other characteristic is you see the folded screen that starts at the back of the tower, wraps down, and continues on through the site, but you see a part missing there, so we've got some work to do. The agenda for the four sections that we're going to go into. In the first, we're going to, in the frontmost building, we're going to look at how we can carry that design further with some glazing ideas on the facades. We'll look at new ways that we can create windows, how we can use parametric components to start to do some things with the stairs, and how we can work and structure the data for that overall building. In the second session, we're going to look at the new structural tools, the new BIM structural tools, and how we can use that to create a canopy structure that fits over the building closest to the tower. In the third session, we're going to step into one of the buildings, and we're going to be looking at some of the features related to how we can make the tedious task of doing interior elevations and tags a lot less tedious, and what I call the flowing design and documentation components. And in the last session, we're going to be looking at the multi-story building here, and we'll be looking at the role of new design assistance tools in version 18 and how they can help us in terms of approaching to detailing as well as managing the data that we have, and also how we can collaborate with other disciplines better through the improvements of the IFC capabilities. So first, let's step into 24/7 and look at how the project is set up on the cloud collaboration tool. So we'll log in. We'll select the project. And again, this is a cloud collaboration tool that multiple team members can work on interactively. What you're seeing here is just the setup of the files within the larger project file. And then we can open the overall, this would be the overall BIM model file. And this is what the project manager would be seeing. And it's interacted with a web browser. You don't need to have other software associated with it. Obviously, it looks a bit different than BricsCAD BIM, but as you can see, Peter's able to bring up the model pretty quickly. It's responsive in terms of how it's displaying the view, so you're only seeing what you need to, which makes it quicker, but you'll see some patchiness as the correct data gets uploaded. There's 4 buildings associated with this. We've talked about the tower piece is the 18-story tower. The building slightly in front of that is a daycare facility. And then the building that's actually in front of that is the yoga studio. And then the next building over is a multi-story administration building. So you'll hear me refer to these as admin, daycare, yoga studio, and tower. So another feature within 24/7 is the ability to cut sections so that you can start to investigate the model as well. And so you can start to look at it and move around, so the project manager could start to look at different components that are in the building and how things are coming together, what information is there, what information is missing. And you can change the orientation of those sections. So you can do a lot in terms of visually evaluating where the BIM is at in terms of using 24/7. And you can also get to a point where you can start to look at the data side of it too. So here we're cutting through a section through the admin building that goes all the way to the tower as well. So if we zoom in and select on a component on the menu on the left, we see that the component has a name and that it's a window, which means it has a classification. It's associated with the ground floor, and it's associated with the daycare. So there's a hierarchy or a structure to that data that's already there. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do in terms of bringing this model up to a common level. One of the things I didn't say about the project manager is that they informed us that we have an upcoming deadline where we're supposed to bring all the designs of these buildings up to a common level. So that's why there's an intensity to try and get these things done quickly. But as we look at these buildings, we can also look at the individual buildings and see what information is there and what information isn't. So if we select the yoga studio, we see that there's absolutely nothing there in terms of organizing. The data is not being organized. We don't have any stories associated with this model at all. So that's a good place that we need to start. And I'm just getting a note from the project manager that's asking, so in looking at 24/7, I'm not seeing that we have the design ideas for the glazing on the Yoga Studio, and I'm not seeing any of the data associated with it there as well. Can we get that done by tomorrow? So this is a good first place to start. Now we're back in BricsCAD BIM. We're in the overall BIM, and if we want to start doing work on the Yoga Studio, we can highlight it and then open that model. Oh, but Jacob, if I can trouble you to go back to the BIM real quick. My apologies. One of the things that I meant to mention was just to describe the multi-user approach that we have set up on this project. This overall project has more than 30 XREFs associated with it. And this is just an example how we decided to break this up, but project teams could break it up any way they wanted. So on the structure browser, we see that we have under building elements, we have the different buildings. And Jacob's expanded the tower. And so we can, by clicking on this, we might do some of the XREFs as portions of a floor that we can reuse multiple times. They might be unique floors. They might be in the center section. There's a group of 3 floors. And that's actually an interesting piece in this whole design. It's what's called the skip step area. So the elevator comes up to an intermediate area, and there's stairways up and down one floor. Although there's a secondary elevator that they could take, it's trying to encourage these federal employees to get some exercise. But on the other buildings, so on the admin building, we just have it set up as one XREF. It's one of the project team's actually discussing splitting this up, which we could do as well. But currently it's just one. And then on the daycare, we have multiple XREFs associated with that. And then on the Yoga Studio, we have just one. So thanks, Jacob, and we can go back to the Yoga Studio now. Looking at the status of this design, certain things are, we've got the building form, we've got the exterior structure in place, we've got some glazing, but not a lot, and checking the spatial locations, we don't have any floors set up. And if we look at the structure browser, in terms of the entities, if we click on that 364, it's just a lot of numbers. We don't have any structure, any classification, hierarchy to that data. So what we can do with this very early model to start to add some structure to the data and generate the data is a new tool, design assistance tool called BIMify. So if we run BIMify, now did you blink? If you did, you might have missed it. But so what happened was quite a lot actually happened. So now if we look at the spatial locations, we have a default building defined that we could change the name of that to be Yoga Studio. We now have 2 floors. So this model had floor slabs on 2 floors in place. BIMify read that, identified that, created those 2 floors. Now, we've got more structure that's been added in terms of the building entities. We now have we have the 2 floors, and we have different classifications for other elements that we might need to incorporate with the floors that we want to. But if we look at floor 0, now we have classifications for all the elements that are associated with that floor. So if we look at the walls, and if we isolate those, then it identified the walls were walls, even though they're on angled slopes. So it's just an example of how we can very quickly not only generate spatial locations, not only generate classifications for the entities that we modeled, but bring those 2 things together as well. Because once we have that set up, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to pick things from the structure browser and start to work with the BIM. Now, let's add some glazing to the facades. So we can do it in the typical way that you've probably done in the past in terms of BIM insert, selecting a window type, and then locating it on the surface that you want, setting the dimensions that you want, and placing it. So we have a glazing assembly here. We can now take that and copy it. And we'll use repeat copy to carry it across the face of those 5 bays. So that's one way that we can start to place some glazing. A new way that's part of version 18 is a tool called Window Creator Tool. So if we took and just drew a rectangle on this wall surface, now highlighting that polygon, or that rectangle, we can now, from the quad, select Create Window. We're given a dialog box that shows us different options for how we could configure that window. And then if we select one of those, we've created the window. Now, that might not blow you away, but if we select the window, what's actually happened is it's a 3D parametric window, meaning that a lot of the constraints have already been set up, so that if we go into these properties, and if we start changing a couple of things, such as the mullion offset, the insertion depth, and you'll see they're updating on the window live after Jacob enters it, the lining thickness, which is the outline border. And so pretty quickly, we can start to configure this window the way we want. And it also gives you a parametric window that you can build from as well. If you wanted to add other constraints to it to add even more capabilities to it, you could. Now, we can also use BIM insert to, if we highlight that window, then if we make a copy of it, it keeps all those same parameters, all the same values that we entered associated with the window that we've just created again. So it's a quick way to get a lot of the same pieces in place. Now, the window creator tool doesn't just have to be rectangular windows. And since we've got an exterior skeleton for the structure for this building, we can have a lot more glazing on these side elevations. So we can offset, we can highlight the boundary of this side facade portion, offset it, create a new boundary, and then we can use the window creator tool. Again, we can select a window style, and now we've created another parametric window that's not in a rectilinear shape. So as you start using it, you start to realize what the power and what's being done once these parametric windows are created. It gives a lot of flexibility for how you want to change and work with them. Now let's create some sections on the Yoga Studio, and we'll step inside and we'll start to look at some of the capabilities related to parametric components using arrays. So we can just zoom in. We've got an opening in the floor, and we're showing this as a simplified example so that you can understand what's happening. So now we can insert a stair block that was generated using an array. So it's a parametric component with an array. And we can place it initially in that opening. Now as we change the view, we see that it's not at the correct floor-to-floor height. And if we select the properties, we see the total height is 3,000, and in this case, we're doing 4,000 floor-to-floor. So what we can do is update this. But what's actually happening is we're increasing the number of risers that are needed to fill that. Because this is set up as an array, it keeps the riser thickness or the riser height the same, and it just adjusts the number of stairs that are with it. And we can also change other parameters such as width of the stair runs and the overall length of the stair. So a fairly simple example, but as the stair type gets more complex, this gets more powerful. So you can do quite a lot with it. So now we need to, when we first set up these models, what Jacob's doing is now switching it from an embedded database to point to an external database. And the reason that we're doing that is so then when we upload it to 24/7, there's a central library that's maintaining all the information about the classifications, the buildings and stories that have been created. And so when we upload this to 24/7, which we're going to do, it'll bring all that data and information together. And we're uploading single files. We're not uploading the whole model. So it can be done pretty quickly. And then when we're in 24/7, we see the updates of the work that we've just done. Now, once we've done that, we can also go back to the main BIM file that we have, and we can reload the XREF here, which is a pretty quick process. And so when we do that, then we see that we now have the updated version of what we were working on. We have the glazing that's been added. So the geometry's there, and then we can check that the data there is there too if we want. But let's also look at another application of parametric components. And for this, we'll start looking at a slightly different scale. We'll look to the rear facade of the tower. And so in this case, we've set up this whole rear facade as an array. And this parametric component has glazing components, it has a catwalk, it has vertical shading fins. And so if we highlight the whole array, then we have parameters that we can adjust for that overall array. So let's say we didn't want the same uniformity across the whole vertical steps of the facade. We could take that array and lower the number of floors to 3 if we wanted to look at a different variation of glazing, spacing, or other things, and then do different bands above. Or we could look at a module of 6 floors and kind of start to explore the same things. Or in this case, we'll just go back to the overall. But the idea is that with structured as arrays, it's very responsive and quick, and you can explore these things. And this is an example of a type of investigation that you might do in early stages to evaluate things that you want to talk about with your facade engineer or others on this type of project. So we'll turn on the solar shading, and we'll add some light intensity so that we can see the shadows better as we start to investigate this module a bit more. But we could start by changing, if we look at the glazing right now, it's at 4 meters, or the fins that are at 4 meters. If we increase the size of those to, say, 8, that doesn't appear like it's going to really work. We'd have to make the fins either really large or tilt the angle, and you wouldn't be able to see out anyway. So let's adjust the fin spacing to 2 meters, and we can also adjust the window spacing to 2 meters. So now we're getting a little shading, but we obviously need to do some work on the fin. So we could select the fin parameters, and we could increase the thickness of it, or increase the size of it. So if we do that, then the fins are getting a bit large, but I think as we start to investigate the angle, we'll start to see that they play a pretty big impact. So then we can go to the fin angle. We can adjust that, a little more shading, and we could shift that angle again. And one final time. And so we're able to see that we're getting quite a bit of shading for that late afternoon sun at this moment in time on that facade, the large glazed facade. So we've got a couple options that we could bring together to talk about and have the facade engineer do some performance analysis on. So you can do a lot with creative components, parametric components with arrays. And one of the challenges as we go to the venue later tonight, think about different ways that you could apply this. And if you have some of those ideas and want to share them, I'll most likely be the one close to the bar. But now let's quickly jump to a couple slides and just reinforce some of the things. Okay. So the multi-user approach. As we mentioned, you've got the capabilities to split up the project however you want. It's up to your design team, and it's up to how you want to separate it, if you want to do things by floors, if you want to do things vertically. I forgot to mention some of the ones about the exterior stairs and others, so you're not limited to try and do things floor by floor. You're just limited by your creativity, what the team can do, and not what the software is telling you that you have to do. It's an overall collection of XREFs, and it's a familiar vocabulary of XREF. So as you've seen, we can just make changes, and then we can upload those to 24/7, reload those within the main BIM file, and you can see them if we're working on individual buildings. The file size is actually quite small. I know others have mentioned that through the course of the morning. And the overall BIM file aggregates all the data associated with the different XREFs. So a multi-user approach. And we've been talking about how that refers to our project team, maybe our larger architectural team, but it also, other disciplines play a role in that because, as people I imagine know, there's a lot of data sources that get introduced during the course of a BIM project. The design assistance feature, BIMify. Again, what we're doing here is we're defining spatial locations, and what we mean by that is the buildings and the stories that are associated with it. We can classify the entities, whether they be slabs, roofs, walls. There's a range of different classification types that we'll talk about in a bit more depth. And then you can associate those classifications with the spatial locations. And it's a quick way to structure the data on your overall BIM. The window creator tool. Again, there's 3 easy steps to do. Define a polygon, select it, select the profile you want, or the window style you want, and then create it. And you can also use that as a starting point for more customized parametric components as well. Parametric windows, excuse me. Now to parametric components with arrays. So this is just summarizing the example that we showed on the rear facade of the tower. How we can set that up as an array that goes over the whole facade, that we can make changes with the parameters that we've set up, and those could be whatever type of parameters that you want to associate it with it as well, and that there are numerous types of application and control for this. We were just showing 2 examples to get your creative juices flowing and looking at a stair and looking at a rear facade. All right, so now let's go to the second segment on structural tools. So have people heard of Sir Ove Arup at all? Okay, think Sydney Opera House. He was the founder of an engineering company called Arup, which I used to work for. And he had a quote from a number of years ago that is, if engineers and quantity surveyors discuss aesthetics and architects study what cranes do, we're on the right road. And so what that means to me, how I interpret that, is that it's the importance of design integration, and that it's a team and a collaborative sport, and not just one entity. And structure, every project has it, and it's definitely a design opportunity. So what we're going to do is show some of the new structural tools and how we can start to work on creating the structure, the canopy structure for the daycare. But wait, another message from the project manager. So he just got an email from the structural engineer. She's going to be coming by the office tomorrow. She wants to discuss the design ideas for the canopy structure. Can we have that ready? Well, good thing we're on that path. So we can open up the canopy drawing. And what Jacob's got here is a series of lines that are starting to lay out the initial idea of a truss configuration. So we've got to carry things forward pretty quickly. So what we can do is we can select 4 of the lines that are representing the columns. We can use a structural tool called BIM Apply Profile. And then we can bring up a dialog box. And across the top left of the dialog box, we have a number of filters. We have types, standard, shape, and name. So we could select a HEA shape, and what that does is it updates the library list that's on the lower left. And so we could look at different options in terms of, and what we're seeing to the right is the more detailed information about that. So if we find the one we want, then we can hit OK. And so what now has happened is that profile has been applied to those columns, as we can see. Now, another way, well, in looking at this, we talked about that we asked the structural engineer if they could just support everything to the right of that. which they could probably do, but it might be pretty thick and pretty heavy. And she might laugh at us. So let's add another column. So we can do this another way with apply linear solid, or linear solid. And what we can just do is select the start and end point. And what's happening here is it's applying a default profile to it. So in this case, just a rectangular shape. And if we wanted to change that, we could do BIM apply profile again. And this time, we can select something that's already in the model. And oh, we just happen to have something more complex. So why don't we select that? So it applies that profile to the column that we just created. Now, again, the structural engineer typically enjoys consistency, so might not be as excited about that. So we can, again, just use BIM apply profile, select one of the profiles of the other columns, and now it matches that same profile. So I'm not a structural engineer, but we see that we still have some members missing. So we can start with the top chord, and we can, again, use linear solid. But this time, what we'll do is we can determine the profile up front. So we could go to the same dialog. We could select a profile, and then hit OK. And then we can draw the start and end points of that beam. And in this case, it's drawing it with the profile already assigned, so we don't have to go through that extra step of doing BIM apply profile after it's created. So once we have this set up, and we're going to have consistency in terms of sizes across the different chords, top and bottom chords of the truss, we can, again, do apply profile, select those. And then we've created those members as well pretty quickly. Now, what we have just to do in this basic starting point of the truss is we need to highlight the webs. So we can do that from the structure browser. And this is where having things organized on the structure browser can be helpful. And again, we can do apply profile. So we're using a lot of the same commands to move pretty quickly. But we have a profile already drawn here for that hollowed out shape that we want. So we can select that. And then it applies it to all of the members. So obviously, we're going to need to do some work on the connections. But it's a quick way to lay out the geometry. And one of the things that Bricsys BIM is doing also behind the scenes is that it's auto-classifying the elements, the structural elements that we create. And we can check if things are looking the way we want them to. So by selecting the profile, we see that all of those 5 columns are identified as columns. If we select the next profile, which is a combination of elements at different slopes, chords at different slopes. So it's showing varies, which means it's interpreting it as both columns and beams. So we can easily, on the quad, classify these as beams. And we can also do the same thing for the webs. So we can select those, classify those manually, because we're also seeing this varies. And we can put them under structure elements member, which is one of the new classification categories in version 18 as well. So now we've got the truss, we've got things classified. Now we need to look at connections and how we can clean those up. So if you're familiar with BIM Connect, you're probably familiar with using it to explore different connections of where walls intersect. This is an example of how that feature is now applicable to structural elements. So if we select just a simple condition of the 2 at the end, and from the quad, we do connect. Now you'll see it's made an initial assumption of what we might want. But we have this submenu at the bottom that allows us to hit Control and toggle through different options. So we could go with the unicorn approach, or we could have it cut off, and that looks better. So we'll go with that one. Now, if you want to do those connections one by one, feel free. Have fun. But you can also do it by selecting them all. And we can launch Connect. And I think Jacob's going to go to one of the more complex ones Yeah, so we have 5 members coming together here. And so when we look at what it's assuming as the option we might want, the flanges on that chord are trimmed and it's reaching to the center of the column. And also the web is ending at the face of the chord. If we hit Control, then we could look at another option which trims those chords off so they stop just at the column. Now, the smooth approach, the smooth option that has them meeting at the center of the column web makes the most sense. So we can hit OK. And then what we find as we start to look around is that it's cleaned up all the intersection options. You might end up wanting to check some of them, but here the webs meet the chord correctly, same there. So we've been able to do quite a lot with one command, and pretty powerful stuff. So now we've got our main truss, we've got our column structure. We can start to create the rest of the trusses that are going to be part of the canopy structure. So we can use another tool that we'll go into in a little bit more detail, but this is called multi-select. So we can select all of the members that are associated with that truss and columns, and we could use BIM drag to create a copy of it. And then we can do a second copy to make the module that we're going to use for setting up the structural bays. And then if we select those two, we can then use repeat copy to span it across the width. By dragging the cursor in the direction we want, we can get multiple options of this until we've got what we need. So pretty quickly we have all 13 truss members and the columns. But also, having experience with the structural engineer we work with, we know that they tend to enjoy larger columns. So what we can do is we can select all the columns in this overall structural layout. And we can do BIM apply profile to that. And we can change. We can look at a larger profile and apply it. And then the columns update in size. Structure browser updates the profiles that are used across it. All the data is kept in place. Then we can delete other entities that we don't need. And we can also now insert the canopy and its secondary structure into this, which Jacob had been working on previously, so he's got it set up as a block and also for time. So we can insert that. And so now we've got the glass canopy that folds down, we've got the secondary structure spanning between the trusses, and we have the trusses. So we're in pretty good shape for our discussions with the structural engineer, but what we want to do is upload this file to 24/7 so we can incorporate it back into the overall BIM. Did I mention it's live? So it might take a second or two. All right, now we can go back to the overall BIM. We can reload that XREF. And now we can see how a structure is meeting the daycare facility. And if we zoom back, we can see that it's starting to fit into the vocabulary of the folded surface moving down the site. So Jacob, I don't know if we wanted to go back and show the yoga studio in terms of the exploded. One of the other features and the new features with the structure tree is that you have the ability to explode it. So when we originally came back to this, it was just showing up as the yoga studio with just one XREF associated with it. But what the exploded view allows you to do is see all the entities that are part of that XREF. So now we've got the floors set up for the XREF. We've got all the elements that were within the yoga studio that we were working on. Thanks, Jacob. Now I think we can talk about a few of the features really quick. So this is the set of structural tools. You saw us use Apply Profile a lot and Linear Solid a lot, and there's a number of different ways to use them and use them in combination. The Smart Selection we touched on, and we could have also shown that in more depth where you can select that for coplanar axes or planar axes, and you have different options that you can control through and select as well. And then connect, and then add eccentricity is another one. So Apply Profile, simple 3-step process. Define or select a path, define the profile, and apply it. And as you saw, there's a number of different ways that you can define the profile. You can select it from the BIM, or the model that you're working with, or you can select it from the dialog box. Linear Solid tool. So just pretty simple stuff here that you can select the profile, and then you can just start drawing the members right away. So you don't have to do an extra step. The add eccentricity. This is one that if you initially lay out members, they might be intersecting at a point, and you want to create a relationship with the top of that column. You could set the eccentricity by selecting those, and then you see the red line that moves across the top. You have the ability to adjust where those members come together. So that's a pretty powerful tool as well. And then BIM Connect. It's the same BIM Connect as it was. It's just got a new job that it can do now. So we select one or multiple intersections, and then we're able to look at the options provided and select the one that makes the most sense. And the Smart Selection tools, this is the one where you can select surfaces or surfaces and members, and then you can select all the coplanar ones or the parallel axes ones, or both. All right. Now we're heading into the third segment, and since we've already been working on the daycare, let's step inside and start to look at some of the features related to design documentation. Design documentation is, as has been mentioned earlier, very important, and it can take a lot of time, and there can be a lot of tediousness to it. So in this case, let's see what the state of the drawing is that we just activated from the overall BIM. If we look around, it appears that all the rooms have been created already. And when the rooms are created, they get a default room tag that has the room name, a sequential number assigned, and an area. And you can change those values if you want. You can change the shape of the tag if you want as well. Now, what we can do, since we have rooms defined, is that we can highlight, hover over it, and select a new feature that's defined interior elevations. So what this has done is it's evaluating a number of different things, but what Jacob's showing is we now have 8 interior elevations. So for every vertical surface that's in that room, it's created a detail volume section. And as you see, they have a sequence that has the room number as a prefix. Again, you can change that, but it's laying that information out for you. That's just one of the examples of what I refer to as flowing design and documentation. We also have, there's a floor plan that's also created as well, and that can serve as a key plan on your sheets that show where the interior elevations are. Now, if we select one of the interior elevations, they're being laid out with a default scale. They're being laid out with, there's a link across all of these so that they go to the same sheet. So you don't have to worry about any of the properties there being adjusted unless you wanted to. And if other BIM sections you create, you typically have to put a destination file to point them to the same place, but BricsCAD BIM is already doing that for you. So we have selected an interior elevation. Now, if we wanted to resize that, it's placed at a default depth from the wall. We can just grab a grip and pull that back if there was more elements in the ceiling plane or other things that we wanted to include. You can also do the same thing with the sides. If you had small vertical surfaces that you wanted to combine into one interior elevation, you could do that and delete others. So you have a lot of flexibility there. Now, once you have them laid out the way you want, what you can do is you can again hover on that room tag, and now we can generate the sections. And so what this is doing is it's taking all those interior elevations and generating the viewports for the sheet. And we can open the sheet. And by default, they're all put side by side. But in the future, BricsCAD BIM is going to be incorporating intelligent layouts so that right now it's easy enough for Jacob to just relocate these views so they're in the title block, but those intelligent layouts will make that even easier. But once we have these laid out the way we want, then if we make changes and come back, they're going to be staying in the same place. Now, a couple other things have happened in the creation of these interior elevations. Jacob, if you can zoom in on one of the tags, please. So it's given it the scale, it's given it the default name of the sequential numbering that it has. And Jacob, if you could also go up to the to the key plan. Yeah, if we zoom in on the plan view a little bit higher, sorry. Yeah, on one of the tags, okay. So it's now given the name of that interior elevation to the tag as well. And you can reposition those, but that's just an example of how the integrated information is being presented initially. So now let's see what happens if we go back and make some changes. We can go back to the model, and we could add another window to this corridor wall. So we could use the window creator tool. It's a daycare, so we could be playful with it. Let's do a hexagon. And so we can then highlight that, use the window create tool again, select a profile, and now we have a parametric window created. Now we can also add another window on the exterior just so that it's impacting multiple interior elevations. So we can highlight one, again, using BIM insert to where it's copying everything that you've highlighted and create another version of that window. So now let's go back and how we can, right now you're not seeing the updates, but if we just update the viewports, our magical hexagon window has appeared. And if we go back and look at the exterior wall interior elevation and update that, then we've got our other window appearing. Now, these are obviously simple examples of interior elevations. You can do a lot of other things. You can add details, you can add notes, you can use BIM patch to be able to add further detail to those to get them the way you want. But this is just an example of how we can quickly lay that out so that you can carry your documentation efforts farther faster. So now let's look at another one that's working to reduce the tediousness. We can activate the section, the plan view, and generate that just as a starting point. And then we can go to that viewport that's been created on a new sheet. Now, if you look at this, hey, great, we got the floor plan. But there's no tags right there right now. But if we want to use the new version 18 feature BIM tags, which as the name implies, it's going to apply tags, it's applying tags to components. So doors, windows, walls. So if we zoom in, we're able to see that we have a number of types. So the wall types are in squares with the leader attached to them. The windows are a hexagon shape with the type number in there. And then the doors are a rounded edge rectangle with the type number in there. So it's giving different representations for different types. And again, you can customize those how you want. So now if we zoom into an area and it's putting the tags in default locations because obviously it's not going to know exactly where you want. But all you have to do is just select them And you can move the grip points to relocate them in different places to get a cleaner view overall. Now we can go back to the main model and show just what happens if we make some changes. We'll just do some simple examples, but if we go back and if we shift this location of this wall, and let's say we select one of the doors and we want to change the name associated with the door, we can do that. And then if we go back to the sheet, our viewport that's been generated, and update it. So what's going to happen is, if you saw quickly, the wall shifted, but the tag moved with it, which is the important point. And also, the door to the left changed from what was D1 to D247. So it's just showing that those are connected and they update, and as you make more dramatic changes, they'll stay updated as well. So, a quick example in terms of BIM tags, but if you think about BIM tags and interior elevations, think about the time savings that are potentially possible on a sheet, on a project, on a large development project. There can be quite a number of time savings in terms of not having to go back and update the tags based on design changes, and that they're linked to the information that you're incorporating into the BIM and the models. So with that, we'll go to some slides real quick. So the interior elevations, and just as a reminder, if you hover on the rooms, once you have the rooms created, that's the gateway to be able to create the interior elevations. You hover over it, select generate interior elevations from the quad, and then for whatever shape room you have, each of those vertical surfaces will get one interior elevation, and the plan view will be also generated. And you can change the interior section size, so you can resize that volume section however you want. It has a default scale. It goes to a common sheet, so they all go to the same place, and there's call-out sequencing. You can add more detail directly on the viewport or in the BIM, wherever you want, and the changes are updated as needed. So very powerful, and part of this where a lot of information is provided default, so that then you can keep your design ideas flowing, but you can make changes as you want. And BIM tags, so it's applied to the viewports after the section is generated. Again, it's just for the types, the walls, the doors, the windows, etc. And it's a separate tag shape for each type. Feel free to move them around. They don't care where they go. And it's linked data. All right, so for the fourth segment, we're going to start looking at design assistance. So to manage a BIM of a project of this size, kind of as the process goes on, is a very challenging task. New data sources are introduced all along the way, and they're updated. They tend to be updated multiple times across multiple cycles. So you want a way to organize and structure that data effectively, and to be able to update that and work with it. You also want to be able to look at the detail connections and resolve those as you can continue to move the design forward. And you also want a way that you can be able to take, since other disciplines tend to work in a lot of other different types of tools, you want to be able to take those files, integrate them into the BIM to be able to evaluate it so you can collaborate with them in more interesting ways. So what we'll do is, now we're going to focus on the admin building a bit. So we can hover over that and open up that file. And again, let's kind of look at the setup that we have currently. We haven't been working on this one, so we've got some exterior glazing in place. You can see that the canopy structures on the right have initial ideas laid out. We've got multiple floors, but let's check the spatial locations and see what we have. Okay, so in this one, we actually have 2 floors, and the building has actually had 3 more levels added to it. So we're missing some information there. And let's check the entities. So, okay, let's see under admin. Okay, so we've got some that are assigned, some of the entities assigned to the floors. Let's see, okay. Appears to be the exterior walls. All right, and also exterior walls for the lower level. So this seems like another application and use opportunity for BIMify. BIMify, which is the new design assistance feature, can be used on new models or it can be used at models at all different stages in the process. So as you've seen, we have a few spatial locations already set up. We have a few assignments set up. So now we can do BIMify. And so what this is doing is it's looking at what everything isn't classified or isn't organized in the BIM, and then it's updating that and bringing it all to the same level. So now if we go back to spatial locations, we see that we have the admin building with 5 floors now. So 3 have been added, and I know a lot of you are paying close attention. So ground level, lower level, and ground floor were already there, so we added 3 new ones. And then if we look at the entities, so we can expand admin, and then we see the different floors, and now we have all the entities, except for a few that we probably need to clean up, but we have all those entities assigned to floors very quickly. So it's a great way to organize the data, and then especially as the model gets more and more complex, we can start to evaluate these things and be able to select them quickly and easily. Now, another design assistance tool that is part of version 18 is called BIM Suggest. And with this tool, for years and years, in architectural practice, it's all been about, when you think about detailing, it's been about picking your spots. You try and find unique or typical details that then you detail or model further to a higher level of detail and use that to represent the design, and hopefully you've got all your bases covered. Well, in version 18, Bricsys has added a new definition to that, or changed the definition. So picking your spots isn't about just selecting a few things and hoping to cover the full design intent. It's about picking your spots so that you can direct model those and then apply that 3D detailing to similar conditions across the BIM. So as an example, we've done a section in the admin building. And if we zoom in on a connection between the wall and the floor. So Jacob's already adjusted this one, but when it's initially made, the structural ply of the floor would just go directly to the face of that wall. So that ply has been pulled through, as well as the, as well as the secondary floor ply that's right above the structure has also been pulled to an outer layer. Now, if we look at the floor connections above and the floor connections below, those are just the default. So it seems like an opportunity that we could use BIM Suggest. So we can select the wall and then select the floor and launch BIM Suggest. So what this is doing is it's searching the whole model for connections that are similar in terms of type and size. And then it's going to present those to us as suggestions, which is where the name comes from. And so now what we see is we have an interactive mode. And one of the things that I meant to say also is that an important aspect is, yes, it's identifying all these connections, but it's interactive to where you can decide if you want to include those or not. And so we have a whole bunch of green circles with check marks. So, and if you noticed, it also went into X-ray mode in terms of a visual style so that we can see these things better. So we've got them spaced all across the model, which makes sense. So let's go to the back where the admin building meets the tower. Now, we know that a couple of those are going to be a different condition. So what we can do is we can select them, and then it toggles it off. And we can do that for the long face on that connection interface, and then we can do it on the floor above. So by deselecting those, then when we hit Apply All, those aren't going to be included, or they shouldn't be included. So when the command finishes, it takes us back to the view that we were in before, and now we can go back to those connections to see if they updated. So it has now changed the geometry in terms of that upper floor connection of the wall has now been changed to match the one that we used as the original. And we can look at the floor below, and the same thing has happened. So now what we can do is we can isolate the 3 floors so that we can look at the details on that backside in a little more effectively. So as we rotate the model around, and if you recall on that lower floor, we toggled off the BIM suggest. So the profiles for those 2 areas haven't been touched. They remain the same. But the one next to it has been updated. So if we go to the next floor up, we had the intermediate one that we toggled off, and so that one stays and hasn't been touched, but the other 2 have. And then on the floor above, we went for all the options for that, and so all of those have been updated from the direct modeling that we did in that one connection. So it's an example of how you can propagate that across the model very, very quickly, very fast. So now let's go to another example that's stepping inside the building a bit more. So if we look at the connection of this wall to the floor, what Jacob's already done is he's taken the structural ply of that wall and dragged it down to the structural ply of the floor so that they're connected. So we don't have the wall just sitting on finishes. And if we look around, so with the interior walls that we have in the cores that are set up on this design, there's going to be a lot of opportunities where we could apply that same connection. So again, we'll just select the wall and select the floor that meet at the connection that we want. And then we can do BIM suggest, run that again. Again, it's searching the overall model in terms of connection options. We're taken to this interactive mode. And now we've got over 40 connections that we should consider and take a look at. Another option that is presented is down below in the submenu, you can activate clipping of sections. And so if you wanted to go to a particular area and look in more detail, you can do that. Now, one thing that I didn't mention on the first one is this green region. What that means is that's the area of that connection that's influenced by or has a similar connection across that length. And you can also see how the wall layer is being brought down into the plane of the floor, which is correct. So the green area is just another way that you can see what region of that model is being influenced. And it can also help you identify areas of the model that haven't been influenced yet. So we can just select Apply All and keep going. And we can see that just updated live in terms of getting to the connection that we want. And again, it's carried across those 40 connections that were identified. So are you seeing a pattern yet? We can move around pretty quickly and update these connections and explore the design ideas for how they interact. But let's show one more example. We'll go to where a column meets the floor, and we'll show a simple way of how, we say direct modeling, and the other ones that we'd shown, Jacob had already made the updates to it, but all this is doing is if it's walls, you're picking the surface of the ply and dragging it down. In this case, it's a column, and we can just drag that face using BIM drag it down into the floor, how many ever plies that we want to go through, we can do that. And in this case, again, it's just connecting to the structural ply of that floor. And so now that we have this, we can select the column and select the floor. And then we can run BIM suggest again. And there should be numerous applications here, because obviously there's structure. So one of the things that didn't mention before is, yes, you could toggle these off one at a time, but you can also use the selection box to toggle them as well. So that if you wanted to take out that second floor, you could just draw a selection box over it, select on it, and it toggles those off. And so now when we hit apply all, it's just doing all those connections for those top two floors. And again, we're taken back to the view style that we were in previously. And you can see that the column has been dropped down to the floor. But if we zoom out a little bit, if down at the lower floor on the first floor, that connection wasn't identified because the floor was thicker. So it's just, again, looking at the type and the size to do that. Now, we can isolate the top floor just to quickly recap the type of connections that we've been doing. So as we zoom in, we can see the imprint from where the column was that we carried down to the structural ply of that floor. We can see how the end profile has been shaped where it's been pulled out into the plane of that wall more. And then if we go to the interior walls, we see the imprint of those into the floor. So quite a lot has been done in quite a short period of time. And I don't know about you, but I find this pretty exciting because it makes detailing and also evaluating where you haven't answered these questions about detailing a lot more effective. All right. So now, getting another message. This one is saying that the mechanical engineer has sent a message to our project manager and is stating that they've attached a file to an email that they've sent to them and that they are going to be coming with a structural engineer tomorrow. And it's an initial layout of a supply air system in the admin building, and they're hoping that we can incorporate that into the BIM for the meeting tomorrow. All right, so pretty easy task, really. And it's one that we're going to have to do over and over again through the course of the project. We're going to have interactions with the mechanical engineer, with other engineers, facade engineer, others that are potentially sending us files. So luckily, if they're exporting out of the tool that they're using in IFC format, we'll be able to very seamlessly incorporate it into the model. So we can do that. But first, let's cut a section so we can see where actually on that, where that supply air system is actually being put, if it's on the top floor or if it's elsewhere. And one thing to note, I mean, this file was, we know that the mechanical engineer is working in Revit MEP. There could be other tools that they're using as well. But if we select the file that was sent as an attachment, then we can import it into BricsCAD BIM. Okay, so we can start to visually inspect it just to evaluate it initially. We see that there's some air handling units on the upper floor. Okay, they're inside the enclosures that we had initially laid out, so that's a positive. We can look at the supply air system layout. Okay, they've got, it's an overhead system, supply air diffusers, and some floating. There's obviously some conflicts with the returns that haven't been hooked up yet, so that's definitely something that we'll need to bring up in the meeting tomorrow. And it appears that they're assuming a suspended ceiling in that area. But let's also look at what data has come in also. So if we look under, or do we want to, let's select a diffuser. Okay, so we've got two system types laid out that if we look at, okay, so if we select on mechanical 3, okay, so that's the main supply system, the supply air system that has been laid out. Okay, so the other one must be related to the mechanical units on the roof and the main supply air trunk. Yep, okay. All right, so one of the things that's also been incorporated in the enhancements within IFC is that there's a lot more classifications that have been added. So if we expand out one of the mechanical systems, we see that there's some new types that are available: flow fittings, flow segment, flow terminal. Actually, it might be a good time, Jacob, to show the classifications dialog. So there's used to be one main category for classifications in terms of core elements, but now there's 3 new ones that we can do: architecture elements, we can do service elements, which is where you see the flow controller, flow fitting, terminal, a lot of the classifications that will come with the mechanical design, and then we have building structure elements, which we saw Jacob specify some things under member earlier, but we have a number of other classification categories. So what this means is there's more opportunity for data to flow into the BIM that can get built into the structure of how we can use it and help make evaluating that type of data more easily, more effective. All right, so let's select one of the diffusers. So as we expand them, we get all the versions of the diffusers, and they all have a number. We have supply and returns listed here. And then if we select one of them, we also have all the properties that are associated with them. And if we look at the offset, so the offset is talking about what that is from the finished floor to the face of the diffuser. So 3,000 millimeters, so that helps us understand or quantify where they're going to put or where they're assuming that the suspended ceiling is. We don't have to go into the BIM and measure it. We can just select the components and identify that. Now, there are a lot of other categories that have been added, or a lot of more properties and other categories that have been added with the improved IFC components. So again, it's an opportunity for a lot more data to be associated with the model. So what we can do with these properties as well is we can also create custom properties. And they're custom properties that could be assigned to the IFC components, or they could be assigned to other components in the model. So within the BIM properties, launching that dialog, we have a range of different categories here. But it doesn't have to be about quantity. It can also be about quality. And there might be specific types of information that you want to have included that aren't in that set. So what you can do is you can create a property set, and maybe we want to add some information about cost estimating. And so we could put cost information as a property set. And we could associate that with the building core elements or wherever you want. And then we could start to assign or create other properties within that category. So we could add a property. Maybe it's cost per linear meter for a wall type. And we could create another property that's estimate phase. So depending on when we get the cost estimates in, we could enter certain data. So once we've created those, at the bottom of the property list, we have that property set, and we have those 2 new custom properties. So we can hit OK, and we can go back to the model. And then now if we selected a wall, we could go to the properties of that wall, go down to the cost information category, and then now we could include a cost of maybe say 100 per linear meter, which is probably under, and an estimate phase of, we say schematic design, since we're still early in design phase. And so now that custom data is associated with that component. And you could obviously select multiple, use the structure browser to select multiple, and then apply data to all of those at the same time. So it's a way that you can leverage the information that you receive, but also add your own information to that if that's useful. So now we could take this and we could take what we've done in this model and upload it to 24/7. And again, just to reinforce, we're doing this live, so it's updating. And in the next section, we'll show you what the project manager would see in terms of the 24/7 viewer. And so we're almost there. Okay, and we can, in talking about the some of the design assistance features, and Eric had mentioned artificial intelligence. Design assistance is a component of artificial intelligence, and it's something that's exciting to see this take shape in version 18. But with BIM 5, we talked about it earlier, but the main thing with this is that you can do it on models at all different stages. If you already have things assigned to each other, it's not going to touch that. It's just going to do with what's unassigned. So you can define spatial locations. One command maps it to those. And then buildings are associated with appropriate stories at that point. And again, it can be utilized at any time during the workflow. And so this is just an example of how the images are just an example of how before it was unstructured, and then after you run BIMify, you've got the floors defined, you select one of those, you have all the components on that floor. Design assistance, BIM suggests, excuse me. The whole concept of one connection can influence many. It's where we can do direct modeling in certain areas, because when I used to work on BIM projects in practice, I wouldn't dare touch this. I would just identify areas. If I added more detail in the BIM, that was on rare occasions. It was mostly done in 2D. But this allows you to set it up and have it in the BIM, propagate it across similar connections, so it's there modeled. When you go to check things, you don't have to assume what the detail is there, you actually see it. And it's got multiple uses in terms of investigation and checking, and kind of answering any questions that are out there about details. And the IFC import. It's the main open exchange format. I mean, I think that's well known. And there's numerous applications that support it, and we're up above 200 now. And the import and export is now certified with Building Smart, as Eric mentioned. This slide was, obviously it didn't include export, but both of them are. And custom properties. You have the ability to select components. If you import them from another IFC file, you can select and apply them there, or you can create them for your own components in the BIM. And then the structure browser. It's keeping track of everything. It's organizing things, and as Hans was mentioning earlier today, you can set up the structure browser in terms of the categories that you see, the configuration that you see, in a lot of different ways, almost any way you want. So you have a lot of opportunities to work with that in unique ways. And you have access to all the XREFs and content that are included. And again, just on the other option you have is that you can explode the structure tree, and it doesn't mean it just explodes and disappears. It means that you're able to see all the properties, or all the entities associated with that XREF. We're not to the thank you yet. All right, let's go to look at now what the project manager would see in terms of on 24/7. And again, this is the view that's on the cloud collaboration tool on the Bricsys 24/7 server. The switching seems to be. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we've got our overall model. And as Peter's moving around, we're in the viewer, and the view's updating. The responsive view showing the pixels that we want in terms of the view that we have. If we look around a little bit, okay, we've got the structure is in there for the canopy that we added using the new structural tools. If we go to the Yoga Studio, we can again see that we've got the initial ideas for the facade treatments there, and the new windows the parametric windows that we created. And then if we go over to the admin building, we could draw a section through there. And we can see that we've got the mechanical system, initial layout in place. And we can also use this to look at from a data standpoint. So we've got all the diffusers within the flow terminal category. And so those are laid out. If we selected one of those, we'd be able to see all the properties there. And then the flow terminal is related to the mechanical system, which is related to the building that it's in. So we can see that a lot of our data is there. And then if we select another component in the Yoga Studio, we can see that it's associated with floor 1. We can see that it's a wall. And we can see that the wall has an identifier, a unique identifier associated with it. So you're able to view all this information, have it at your fingertips on 24/7. Now, in theory, our project manager should be happy with us. And I could sit here and wait for a text that I think will never come. But why don't we close this session out? So we've seen a lot in terms of what Bricsys BIM version 18 can bring in terms of the features, in terms of the workflows that it can influence, and some of the ways that it can be utilized. How a project manager utilizing 24/7 can have access to the overall project, see what the updates are of the team, review and comment, and have all that information at their fingertips. How parametric windows can be created from just drawing an outline. How structure tools can be used to quickly lay out structural design ideas within the BIM. How tedious tasks, such as creating interior elevations, creating BIM tags, and incorporating those into your design documentation can be made a lot quicker, a lot easier. How the improved IFC capabilities can enable not only importing and exporting the files into our BIM, but also utilizing the information that's coming in with all the new classification categories, all the new properties. So we have an increased richness of data that's being incorporated into the BIM. How design assistance, in terms of the ability to generate and structure data at any stage in the design process, can be done quickly and effectively. And how direct modeling single connections can be propagated across the overall BIM and address design details in ways that haven't been able to be done before. And last but not least, how the multi-user approach, which allows us to set up this large complex in multiple XREFs, slicing and dicing how we want, can be accessed easily on 24/7. We can download single files. We can work on those single models, work on those, upload those to 24/7. We can adapt it as needed. We can work with other disciplines, and we not only can work in parallel with our team, but with other disciplines. So Bricsys BIM version 18. See how you can make it successful for your projects. Thank you.